All right, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I did unmute myself. Look at Abby encouraging people to turn their cameras on. Thank you, Abby. Anybody who's brave today? Give me one brave person that can tell me a little bit about what they're seeing in their market or how they're feeling the market is. I'm gonna sit here until somebody does. No one's caving to peer pressure.
I chatted it in. I just do weekly prayers for appraisals.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking in my head, but it's a good statement. So maybe we can talk offline, just because I don't want to jinx myself, because I have a couple listings in contract that need appraisals and then have a few more coming up. So I'm not going to jinx myself, but so far so good this year. So okay, well, we'll get rolling. I would love to see some participation from you guys. I think this would be so much more valuable, or can be so much more valuable for all of you if you're willing to share your experiences. I know really quickly before we jump into the market data, which is why you guys are here. I also hope this is valuable. Recently had a listing in an area that I would say I sell in fairly regularly, but not all the time. And kind of had some back and forth on pricing and decided to go honestly a little bit lower than I wanted to because the seller pushed me in that direction. And then activity was kind of like not good. And then talked to a couple agents with it on the market. They were like, hey, I think you underpriced this. And I'm like, yeah, but activity is just, it wasn't there at all, to be honest. Which is not what I'd been seeing with other listings, and actually put another listing on the same weekend and had great activity. But I think what I realized is I was freaking out because of a low number of showings, was that in this particular area, there was a price point at which definitely things started slowing down. So there's still stuff selling above that price point, but it was a very distinct difference on what was happening above that versus what was happening below that. So the moral of this story is, number one, I think we're in a market where pricing and understanding all the things we're going to talk about today is going to be super important. But number two, it just underlined the fact for me that real estate is super local. And I still have my presentation set up so that the beginning is national, and then we move into Central Ohio for those of you that are in Central Ohio, or if you just want to know what's happening in Central Ohio real estate. But even that is not local enough. And so I encourage you with pricing, especially as we move into the second half of the year, which I think has, not that the first half has been anything but uncertainty, but I think the second half of the year has the potential to have even more uncertainty with regards to what's going to happen with the overall economy. The likelihood of a recession, I think the likelihood is continuing to increase. And so I just really encourage you guys to lean on each other and do your market data, use the showing time reports, and really pay attention to what happened with the active, if there are actives, and then also what happened with the contingent properties that just went into contract, maybe even the week before, reaching out to those agents and asking them, what was your showing activity like? What was your offer activity like? So you can make sure you're setting the correct expectations for the seller, because luckily we were able to get it in the contract. But when you have your seller, get a hotel because there's supposed to be a bunch of showings and then you don't have those showings, it's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. So yeah, so that was my quick anecdotal in the market, real life story for you guys. So again, feel free to throw those out there, ask questions. I think the more interactive this can be, the more valuable. And I can promise, no matter how stupid you think the question is, there is at least one person, if not 10 people on this call that are thinking the same thing. So please don't be shy. I know many of you on here, and I know you're not shy individuals. So if you can't get on camera, type it in the chat, but would love that interaction. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump right in here. And we will go to slideshow. All right, so hopefully you guys are in the right place. I'm Troy Marsh, and we are talking about becoming a local market expert. So again, a little bit about me. I've been an agent since 2004. I have a team, which I'm currently adding members to. So if you or anyone you know is interested in joining a team, interested in getting more leads, those types of things, please have them or you reach out to me. I'm also a real estate investor. We have 15 investment properties, also looking to spend more time in that sector this year as well. And then I'm also a real estate coach with I Love Coaching. So if you or anyone you know is interested in hiring a coach, I would love to talk to you. And if I'm not the right fit, I have many other coaches that are awesome as well that I could introduce you to. You can always feel free to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. And we are putting a big focus on that. So we should have some more content coming out soon. So what we're going to talk about today, obviously the overall part of our story here is definitely market trends. So we're going to look at inventory and selling trends nationally. We're going to talk about interest rates, which I feel like we could all regurgitate ad nauseum, and yet still it's a story. And it continues to basically be, in my opinion, the biggest point of impact in the housing market, both last year and then still this year. So we should spend time talking about it. And I think it's important as an agent that you understand and can explain what's happening and why. I think it really helps the consumer feel a little bit better about uncertainty, because obviously none of us control the interest rates. We're going to talk a little bit again, like we did last month, about inflation and how it impacts, because the reality is inflation is the biggest driver for what's happening with interest rates. And then again, just becoming your local economist of choice. And then also we're going to look at Central Ohio inventory and selling trends. So that's kind of the order we're going to do it. All right, active listings. These are national numbers here. Active listings have actually come down and they are not going up. Why is this important? Well, if we look at the trend line here in April of this year, outside of 2021, we really have never seen a trend like this. And remember, 2021 was just coming off of COVID. We had a bunch of weird stuff with some areas being quarantined. And again, this is a national number. But you can see even in 2022, inventory was going up. In 2017, 18, and 19, by the time we got to April, we were seeing a sizable increase in inventory. And here this year, we're seeing what could be considered pretty flat, statistically irrelevant, but still actually a little bit less month over month. Now, that being said, it's still, as this number states, 48% higher than last year. So we do still have more inventory than last year, but that number, you can see if it stays in a flat line by June, it's going to be less than last year. And so these year over year numbers can be really misleading. And so I think in terms of being a local market expert, one of the things you can do is make sure that you're interpreting some of this data to your clients, because basically what we're looking at when we look at a year over year number, and I won't spend this much time on every slide, but is we're looking at what happened in this line only. and we're ignoring everything that happened after it and everything that happened before it here in this graph. And so you really do have to pay attention to this trend line. And that trend line is down or flat right now in comparison to previous years, where this time of year inventories are going up. And remember, inventories are the number of properties that are on the market. And so those are not sold properties or new listings. We'll get to those in a second. All right, pending sales. So this is a big mess going on right here, because everybody's been around the same amount, except for last year in 2021, pending sales were a lot higher. So what does this tell us? This tells us that, as crazy as it is, we could have seen an anomaly in terms of the number of pending sales in 2021 and 2022. And we could be talking about this being our new norm in terms of a lower number of sales, which if we were to go back 10 years, we would see that the number of sales happening in a year has been declining really over the last 10 years since like 2014, I believe. And we were all hoping that that was going to start increasing again as we went back to more of a normal market, but we're obviously not seeing that happen. So new listings, this is, if interest rates are the story of the year, this is like a 1A, is new listings. And in my opinion, the new listings being down is absolutely due almost 100% to the fact that interest rates are high. And that is over here, you can see that, and this did not get updated, the date here, so sorry about that. But you can see that interest rates, you know, a seller doesn't just have to sell their house, they have to sell their 2 or 3% mortgage. And up to this point, they just have not been willing to do that, because as you know, because most of you are homeowners, you're not only selling your low mortgage, but you're also needing to go up in price to really buy your same house. So what we are hearing, I listened to this podcast called On the Market. It's a Bigger Pockets kind of, it's not Bigger Pockets, it's a offshoot of Bigger Pockets. But they had the CEO of Rocket Mortgage on last week or the week before, and he was talking about the cash out refis and home equity loans are increasing. And what they're seeing when they're surveying these people is that some people are saying, you know what, like I'm willing to take the higher interest rate on my current house, but what I'm not willing to do is to pay $200,000 more for the same house in a different neighborhood. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull some of my equity out of my house and do repairs or do renovations to it, so I like it for a little bit longer. Now, I think as rates likely fall back, which we're going to get into, but they're probably going to be back into that 5 to 5.5% range by the end of the year is what most people are predicting, and maybe even sooner than that, that we will see the gap between 3 and 5 is a lot smaller than the gap between 3 and 6 or even 3 and 7. And so my guess is going to be that trend is going to be relatively short-lived. And if rates do what they're predicting, which they almost never do, that we will see a little bit more loosening up of this new listings. But if this were to continue, I mean, we're just barely above the April when the whole country was shut down. I mean, you guys realize this? We're at like 390,000 new listings in the US. And during April in COVID, when literally the economy was shut down, we had 350,000 new listings. Like, that's mind-blowing, guys. So we've just got to see this change. Otherwise, the market is going to continue to be in this supply and demand crisis, which is just going to continue pushing prices up and exacerbate the affordability issue. So days on market, as most of you know as agents, most likely trending down, which is normal from a seasonality perspective. As you can see, even pre-pandemic, the curve is very normal. If anything, it's actually flattened out a little bit, meaning the decrease in days on market has actually become less, which is an interesting trend, actually, and something that you see, like, this is a pretty drastic slope from March to April. In most years during the pandemic, it was even more. Actually, it happened a little early in 2022, but and so if we see this continue to flatten out, it could be an indication that there's going to be some stuff that's just going to sit on the market. And so we'll see about that. I know, especially in other parts of the country, as we'll get to it in a moment, I think the majority of you guys are in the Midwest, and we are absolutely seeing the Midwest lead the way in terms of being one of the best real estate markets in the country, which we can't often say except for during recessions. And so, but I think we would see that in other parts of the country, houses that aren't perfect or are a little bit overpriced are sitting on the market for sometimes months at a time, and that's leading to a little bit higher days on market. And I anticipate that will continue as one of the biggest differences between this year and last year. Median list price. Now, again, this is median list price, so it's not sales price. So I don't love this. Unfortunately, realtor.com does not publish a graph for a sold price, which is a little mind-blowing to me, but it is what it is. But you can see we're definitely trending upward, which is continuing to be good. Year over year, probably in May, I would guess we're probably going to be lower year over year, and then we'll be lower again in June, probably lower in July, although it'll be close. And then once we get into August again, my prediction is that we are going to be back to positive year over year growth. I think we're just going to see this slowly increase, maybe even plateau. But because the end of last year prices had dropped so much, just a flat line here across the rest of the year will still lead to better numbers. But it's going to be this time period here that you guys are going to want to be the local economist of choice. This is something that you guys will absolutely want to be able to know in your local market and be able to explain. Like I said, let's say this line goes across here. It's going to be from May, which those numbers will be reported in June, all the way through the July number, which is reported in August. They will be talking about year over year decreases in pricing. The news media loves to talk about negative things. So do not think for a second they're going to miss their opportunity to slam the housing market. So you need to be able to educate people on the fact that, yes, we're off the peak, but we are nowhere near, we're nowhere near here any longer. I'm sorry, actually here any longer. So you guys need to be able to talk about that. Price reductions. Definitely, we have a trend again downward. Last year, we had a huge trend upward. You can see if you follow this yellow line that we peaked here in October. And then we started dropping in terms of price reductions. That was when everybody realized that, hey, the market is really changing and we better price correctly. We can't overprice and have it sell for sure. But then that trend has continued to go down. And so we'll see what happens here. You can see outside of 2022, actually, typically, as we move into the summer months, we see price reductions increase. So we'll see what happens here this year. And that's largely due to just that there's more houses on the market. Sellers are unrealistic about price. And so you have more price reductions. However, it'll be interesting with the lower number of new listings if that continues, or we stay kind of below average on that. So here's our regional comparison. Like I said, yay Midwest. We don't lead these lists very often, except for in a recession, because we tend to not have super high highs and we tend to not have super low lows. On the coast, they love to be really high and really low, and that's just the way it is. And so this shift is no different. So you can see that the amount of active listings, the Northeast, for whatever reason this year, is like they seem to not have very much activity in general. Their new listing count is super low, but then they also haven't really increased their active listing count much. So really Northeast is actually leading the way, but Midwest is a close second. So median listing price is actually increased more in the Midwest than anywhere else. And then days on market is second lowest behind the Northeast. However, this is what we should be talking about as agents right here. The reality is that the majority of our clients, friends, relatives, anyone that we come into contact with did not buy their house in the last 2.5 years. Statistically speaking, a very small percentage of the people that we come into contact every day bought their house in the last 2 years. I heard a stat on that podcast with that On the Market podcast with the Rocket Mortgage guy, that the average American has $170,000 worth of home equity. $170,000. So that's more than ever in recorded history since they started tracking that, which was probably not that long, probably in the last 10 years. However, you can see this, like, look at the number of active listings. So up here, we see we have 19% more than last year in the Midwest, but 53.9% more than, or less than pre-pandemic. Look at the South. Oh my gosh, they have 100% more listings on the market right now than last year. Still, it's 40.6% lower than pre-pandemic. So we've got to bring everybody into reality that year over year numbers don't explain the whole story. And we've got to look at the fact that almost everybody who owns a house right now has a huge amount of equity, which is, by the way, one of the biggest reasons why this is not going to be a repeat of 2008. Is because everybody has tons of equity. If you lose your job and you have $150,000 worth of equity tied up in your house and you have no money to buy food, what are you going to do? You're going to sell your house, get a check for $150,000, go rent a place, and put food on the table for the next 12 to 18 months or however long you can live off of that money. Like in 2008, people didn't have the equity. They had adjustable rate mortgages. And so they just foreclosed because they didn't have the equity. But that's not the case this time around. So again, we've got to be educating ourselves, and kudos to you guys. That's why you're here. And many of you are here every single month. So good job. Interest rates, I talked about this. It is the news, absolutely the news. One thing that's happened here over the last couple months, which has been very interesting, if you follow interest rates on a day-to-day basis, you're probably going crazy because of this right here. There's been a range basically from here to here. And really ever since March, we saw them shoot up in February and then topped out in March. And really ever since March until now, they've just been bouncing basically 50 basis points or 0.5%. Like sometimes in 1 or 2 days, they'll go from being at 6.5 to being all the way down to 6, or being from 6 3/4 to 6 1/4. And so ultimately, even though it makes us go a little bit crazy from an affordability perspective, because it does change what your clients can be approved for, it is actually better than this right here. And even it's better than this. Obviously, we would all love to have them go down, but the uncertainty of things definitely causes people to just panic and do nothing. And so a lot of people have been very surprised at the amount of activity that's been happening in the market this year in the spring. Across, really, economists screwed up their forecasts because they were for sure that the housing market was just going to have this huge increase in inventory and that nobody was going to be buying houses. And what happened is, though, my opinion is that as soon as rates started staying in a predictable place, it makes buyers, hey, this is what my payment's going to be, and let's go buy a house if I'm ready, because my rents are going up, which we'll get to in a second. My rents are going up anyways, so I might as well go lock in my mortgage. I've heard more people say that to me in the last 12 months than ever before in 20 years in real estate. We've talked about this a million times, the difference between today's rates and rates before. But again, just a good reminder, if you're taking out let's say a $400,000 loan, this does not include taxes and insurance, which insurance is up as well, by the way. But on a $400,000 loan, you're paying $720 more a month than you were at the beginning of last year. It makes a big difference for the average family. This is absolutely the reason why inventory is staying low. Now, let's talk about this caveat down here really quickly. My opinion, well, it's really not my opinion. It's what the Federal Reserve, who sets interest rates, has said over and over and over again. The Federal Reserve has two mandates. One is to keep employment high, and the other one is to keep inflation low. They have basically come out and said that they care more about inflation being low than they do about employment being high. And one of the things that they're looking for in order to be willing to stop raising short-term rates, or even just keeping them the same, or hopefully allowing them to come back down, is they're looking for employment to soften. They're looking for unemployment to increase. And some of the estimates out there are pretty drastic in terms of anywhere from 1 to 5 million jobs that could be lost between now and the end of the year, depending on who you listen to. And so I believe that as soon as some of those job cuts begin to happen, and again, people realize that they have $150,000 worth of equity tied up in their house and they now have no job, that although they love being homeowners, that they need that money. And if you don't have a job, you can't qualify for a home equity loan to get that money out. So two things I would tell your clients to do. Number one, go get your home equity loan now while you have a job. Even though the interest rate is high and you have no intention of using it, gosh, it would stink to sell your house just because you lost your job and needed money for 3 months, right? But it is going to be good for you because most people aren't going to call you, and most of you probably aren't going to call your clients and tell them that, even though I told you to. And they're going to, some of them, not all of them for sure, are going to lose their job. And they're going to look at their house and say, hey, I've got these credit card payments. I've got all these other things going on. I've got a car loan. I've got all these things, and I'm not bringing in any money to pay any of it. So if I sell my house, I can take $50,000, pay off all that stuff, and I still have $100,000 to live on for the next few months while I look for a job. And I think you're going to see some of that happening, and unfortunately for all the wrong reasons, but I think it will loosen up the housing market, along with the interest rates most likely coming down as those job losses start to happen, because the economy is driven by people spending money, and when they lose their jobs, they quit spending money. Or even when their neighbor loses their job, it makes people pull back on their spending. And we're already seeing that to a degree, just not as much as we thought. And therefore it's having inflation is coming down more slowly than we thought. This is left over from last month. I decided to leave it in here just to remind you that that year over year number with housing, I believe, is going to become very important over the summer in terms of looking at year over year inflation, because housing is one of the biggest parts of what they use to determine inflation. We're going to start to see the year over year inflation come down more closely to the range that the Fed wants it to be. So hopefully that means that they're going to pause rates. And we talked about that last month. Again, this is rents are used more than housing prices to determine inflation. And so this is just showing you that typically inflation kind of follows the same trend as rental prices. And so again, if we look at updated rental prices, this is from Zumper through April, you can see that the year over year numbers for both 1 and 2 bedrooms nationally has been going down. And so again, that's going to help from an inflation perspective. You see that 1 bedroom median price for a 1 bedroom flat month over month is basically the same or down even a little bit, and then the 2 bedroom is up a 0.5 percentage point month over month, which isn't abnormal. The rental market behaves much like the selling market. It's definitely more competitive and busier during the spring. I compiled a few fun facts, added some information from Apartment List, also from Zumper. Again, these are just the best places from a rent growth perspective in the US. So we've got Augusta, Georgia. We might have a couple people on here from Indianapolis or near Indy. And then interesting that Miami and New York are in the gainers. And then the top fallers are Kansas City, Irving, Texas, Newark, New Jersey, which is right next to New York. So that's interesting. Buffalo, New York, and then good old Detroit, Michigan. And then you can see here year over year changes in rents. Looking back all the way to 2018, you can see it dropped during the pandemic and then spiked obnoxiously. And then it's really been down ever since actually the end of 2021, but it was the month over month increases. So, but just kind of talking about the same thing. And then you can see that the some of the fastest growing places in terms of rent over the last 12 months, and then also over the last 6 months, you can see that the last 6 months has seen a lot less rent growth. But you see Louisville, which there's probably some in, Indianapolis, Cincinnati actually topping the national charts, and then Columbus down here at 4% as well. So, but then if you go back and look at the last 3 years, you see that us in the Midwest, like we're raising our hand, excited about being on top. And then you realize that Phoenix has been up 30% despite being in the negative for the last few months. And you realize that our 6%, 4% means nothing compared to there. So, yeah. So again, I'm going to beat this into our heads with regards to what we need to be talking about. I think talking about how Fed funds rate is different than interest rates, meaning interest rates rose. For those of you that follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you saw I did a reel on it a week and a half ago. When the Fed raised rates, I had 4 people, including a couple agents, tell me, oh, Fed raised rates again today. That sucks. And I'm like, no, mortgage rates are not the same as the Fed funds rate or short-term rate. So remember that your car loan, your credit card, your home equity loan, and then also commercial loans tend to go off of that rate that makes the national headlines. Mortgage rates follow closely to the bond market, and typically in many cases behave opposite of that, which happened a week and a half ago. On the same day that the Fed raised rates, mortgage rates went down. I also think that if you're not meeting with your local lender and finding out different unique products that can help your buyers offset some of the affordability losses that are happening due to high interest rates, you're doing your clients a disservice. I will tell you, I had a client this weekend, a listing where the buyer that ended up going into contract, this was what happened. They went into they were looking at another house in the neighborhood. We put out 15 signs for the open house. After looking at that house, they happened to see one of our signs, decided to stop by the open house, loved the open house. I followed up. We have a good system for gathering the client, their information, even if they have an agent. Reached out to their agent in the afternoon and said, hey, your client stopped by. They seem to really love the house. What's going on? The agent responded with, they aren't approved for enough in order to compete on that property. And I said, interesting. I said, well, have you talked to their lender? Because last week mortgage rates went down, and I'm curious, and this property has, in my compared to our average in the local market for this price point, the property taxes are lower. I said between the lower property taxes and interest rates having dropped, there's a chance that they might be able to qualify for this home, but they couldn't last week or whenever the pre-approval was from. She goes, okay, let me go check. Within 2 hours, they sent over an offer, which obviously, since we're in contract, ended up being the best one that we got. And all because I understood what was happening with the market and pushed the agent, who, by the way, was on vacation in Jamaica. And so I'm just trying to bring as many real world examples into this as I can, but this stuff works, and it gets you transactions, and it gets you closings, and it gets your clients their goals, whatever those goals might be. And so I really, really, say kudos to you guys for being here, but let's internalize it and start using it. Again, lots of the same with this that we've been talking about. If you're in a growing city and have low inventory, I think you're going to continue to see lower days on market. I think builder listings on the MLS can sometimes impact these days on market conversations as well. Interest rates we talked about, and definitely show your clients how they can leverage the equity in their current home to either go buy another one or protect themselves by getting a home equity line of credit. I think a lot of agents struggle with what to say to past clients to check in. Bring them value, get them set up on some kind of value, whether it's home bot or whether it's a neighborhood nurture and command, whether it's we use Brivity to send market reports, any number of products that are out there to just update them on the value of their home, and then let them know what they can do with that money. How can they get that working for them right now? Because as safe as it feels, equity sitting in your house is doing nothing for you, and that may be the best place for it, but being able to access it gives you a nice cushion in case things happen that are unexpected. So all right, so we're going to jump into local market next, but for anybody that is thinking about leaving, I'll stop here really quickly. Does anybody have any questions at all? I just talked a lot. I just looked at the time and it's 1:40 or 12:40, 1:40. Anybody have any questions, comments? You guys are going to all be quiet on me, huh? No? All right, I'll keep rolling then. All right, Central Ohio. Really more of the same with regards to the national market. New listings are way down. You can see here that year over year, new listings are down 24.5%. That's this number here. And they're down 25%, and then solds are down 24.5%. I think we're going to continue to see this active inventory number reduce, and we're going to continue to see this number stay really high. But what this means in real house numbers, you can see it was almost 1,000 fewer homes entered the market in April of this year compared to April of last year. That's going to be significant, and it's going to impact the number of commission checks that get sent out or cashed in people's bank accounts. And so it's a number that if you haven't been paying attention to it, you need to start paying attention to and make sure you're getting your unfair share. I started doing this a couple months ago, but just breaking out the number of new construction compared to resale. And what you can see is the new construction, new listings were only down by 4%. Compared to the new listings in existing homes or resale homes was down 26.3%. So even worse, you got more pendings, and then solds in both sections are down. However, I would anticipate this number to get smaller given the fact that new listings are only down by 4.3%. And remember, this number with new construction is a little bit misleading because not every new construction gets put in the MLS. So, all All right, this is this date here did not get updated, but the information is updated from May of last year compared to, or I'm sorry, from May to April. So you can see in the first part of the month, we actually have fewer listings on the market compared to the beginning of April, the first half, essentially. And then new listings are up 15% compared to the first 2 weeks of April, which is what we would anticipate. But solds are down, which again is not surprising. Now, if we look at the first 15 days of this year, first 15 days of May this year versus first 15 days of May last year, we're continuing on that same trend, seeing that the number of new listings is down 22%. So again, significant number. It's what, over 400 listings difference. Now, remember, sometimes when we're looking at those in very tight ranges, like that, it can, we know that a lot of listings come on the market later in the week. And so we could be seeing a little bit of variation with regards to the days of the week that are included there, but obviously it's in line with what we've been seeing. So I would anticipate that to change or to stay similar. Average days on market in April took a huge drop from 32 down in March down to 23. And then you see that our sales price compared to original list price is back up to 100%. You can see last year at the beginning of the year, we were seeing average property selling for 3 to 4% more than list price. Now, again, this is original list price. So some properties that have done a price reduction are selling quite a bit below what their original list price was. Whoops, sorry, little happy on the trigger finger there. But definitely 100% is a major change from 4%, from 96% back in December. So again, months of supply, this is on resale properties back below 1 month. We bumped up in April to 0.8 months of inventory, but a lot of the smaller niche markets in suburban areas and things like that, I've seen as low as 0.3 months of inventory. So it's just crazy depending on the price point and the area. And then new builds, again, we also saw a little bit of a bump up in April, but I think that has to do with a lot of inventory coming online in April that maybe isn't ready to go yet. And so I wouldn't read too much into this number. In a general trend, our month supply with new construction is definitely still not oversupplied in any way, shape, or form. Average sales prices, again, we've got our sold down here. We've got our active up here. We saw a couple big listings list. And so I would anticipate this coming back closer to that 400 number. But we're seeing basically the bottom of the market in terms of closed transactions was in January, really probably bottomed out somewhere in the November to December timeframe. And then those just closed in January. And now we're starting to see the trend back up. And I would anticipate that we probably will go into the negative also here in Columbus, maybe as soon as this month. I don't know that we see the number increase by 14,000, but we could. We saw a $28,000 increase in average sales price between March and April. So it's definitely possible. So, all right, local rents. I know that other chart didn't have it, but local rents are up 4.2% year over year. And so, yeah, our average rental price is $990 for a 1-bedroom and $1,350 for a 2-bedroom. And actually, let me take that back. That's a 1-bedroom year over year increase of 4.2. A 2-bedroom year over year increase was 20.5%. So feeling a little bit of those numbers from the West Coast, I guess. And that's all I got. So hopefully somebody's going to talk to me here, but if not, then that is my presentation. So anybody have any questions or anything that they've seen in their market that they want to share? I'd love to have at least one person share. You guys are all quiet today. Nothing even in the chat. You're so welcome, Connie. I appreciate you coming. Well, if nobody has anything, I'll jump off because I feel like I just talked to myself for 40 minutes or 45 minutes. But thank you guys for coming. I'm happy to do it. I love doing it. And you guys can always feel free to reach out to me. As always, shoot me an email at troy@marshhomegroup.com, and Allison will be happy to send these slides over to you. And you guys are always more than welcome to R&D as much as you need to or want to. So thank you guys again, and have an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see you next month.